Hello, friends. Welcome to today's episode of the Daily Coffee Pro by Mapper Forward. Today we're talking about a fun subject. Some people may not think of it as fun. They think of it as quite arduous. But for me, this is a fun subject. We're talking about how to sell more roasted coffee. And this is a subject that at face value people get really terrified of, because while they want to do it, they know that it's really tough. But we can break the process down so that it's more approachable for you. And I'm going to talk to you about the way that I help my customers figure out how to do this. A couple of things. First of all, if you are somebody who's focused on supporting the supply chain and creating a sustainable, long-term value chain and supply chain that works for everybody, doing this, selling more coffee, is the best way that you can support producers. And number two, there are no shortcuts to this process that don't cost astronomical amounts of money. And if those shortcuts were guaranteed to work, everybody would do them. So the kinds of shortcuts that I'm talking about is to find influencers and throw money at them, get them to talk about your product. Does that work? Sometimes, yes, it does. Most times, it does not. It all counts on where you find the influencers, how you find the influencers, and how much clout you believe they have and they can demonstrate that they have. So we're just going to park that for a moment, and we're going to talk about, how do you sell more coffee, more roasted coffee? So this is not about selling more brewed cups of coffee in a cafe. This is about how do you sell more coffee in the middle of this pandemic for who knows how long. Now, this applies to you if you have a cafe or if you have an online store. So provided that you have a mechanism for selling your coffee to people, everything that we're going to talk about in today's episode of the podcast is going to be applicable to you. And I really want to reiterate before we deep dive into this, there are no shortcuts. You have to go about the strategic action, execution that's required to make this work. And if you do, you will see success. That part, I promise you. It's just hard to get there. But that doesn't mean hard doesn't equate to fun. And this can be a lot of fun for people. So, first of all, you have to understand what you are selling. You have to understand what your product is. And I don't just mean I have roasted coffee. You have to understand what your brand is, what your product is, and what your customer is. And in order for you to understand all of that, you have to understand what your USP is, your unique selling proposition. Now, in this situation, I'm going to talk directly about a brand that I have directly mentored into birthing their idea during the pandemic, so that we can really demonstrate to you that this works. And this is a company called Perspective Roasters. And these are two individuals who have done the work to build grit and to know what the journey is going to take. One of them is Reggie Black, who is an artist. He's a creative mind. He's an entrepreneur. He's a branding specialist. And the other one is an analyst. He is an analyst that works for the Pentagon and does an enormous amount of data analytics and makes lots of decisions that affect big budgets. How do you bring those two people together to find a unique selling proposition that results in something that's unique to set them out in an industry filled with coffee roasters and more of them popping up every day? Well, you speak about what you know. So at the key of what you need to do to figure out what it is you're selling and how to understand your product is figure out what it is that you know. And so what do Reggie and Seiku, the analyst, know about this? So Reggie is a creative and Seiku is an analyst. And so the concept that we've come up with is that they are releasing a brand that is the artist and the analyst. And they are going to talk about coffee and social situations, things that are happening in society from the perspective of the artist and the analyst. Now, the brand potential for this is extraordinary. This could be extrapolated into what will become a multimedia platform where you get access to that platform through coffee. And so a lot of the things that will be created around the brand, you'll need to be a subscriber to get access to, but the access will be free once you are a subscriber of their coffee brand. This is a unique selling proposition, and they are playing to what they understand and they know. And so in doing this, they're able to understand what their product is, they're able to clearly define their brand, and they are able to figure out who their customer is. And so, who is their customer? Their customer is somebody who wants to learn about coffee, who wants to understand different perspectives of the same situations. They are people who don't just want to grab a 99-cent cup of Joe, to use a usual term that people use. They want to understand things. And so immediately by identifying what their product is, what they're really selling, not just the roasted coffee, all of it, everything that's about the brand, they're much more clearly able to define who their customer is. Then, once they've done all of that, and as I'm sure you can understand, that takes a lot of work. And a lot of that work is the sitting down and thinking it through of what is the unique thing that I have to offer. And this is, in a previous episode, we spoke about superpowers. Doing this is one of my superpowers. And it's why the groups, the mastermind groups and the consulting work so well, is because if you listen to the episode with Reggie on the podcast recently, in one conversation, we were able to take a look at what they were looking at rolling out, and we just hacked away and moved everything out of the way and got to the essence of what they were trying to do. And that took one conversation. And from that, they ran with it like crazy. And that leads us to our next thing. Once you've defined everything, you've got to have a plan. Figure out all of the things that you need in order to access your customers. So where are you going to sell your coffee? Are you going to sell it on an online store? And if you're going to sell it on an online store, that's going to inform who your customers are going to be. Let me expand on that a little bit. If you're looking to sell coffee to your friends at your soccer friends, I'm not sure if they use soccer here, but in most places they use football. All right, so you're going to find how to build a coffee roasting brand that is focused on football and soccer fans. Well, the best way to start a business like that is to go and find those people. Is the best way to find those people in an online store, or is the best way to find those people some other way? I don't know. I'm not in that space. But your research will determine what's the best way to get access to those people, whether it's in a cafe that brands itself very soccer focused so that you can launch and then move on to an online store. But in the middle of a pandemic, the best way to set up a store for a coffee roasting brand is to have an online store. And then later, if you need to have a physical place that people can pick things up, you can set it up later. Same applies to a church group, to a mother's group, or a professor's group, anything you want. Figure out who the customer is and how you're going to get access to them. And make it fun. Make it super, super fun for people to find your brand and engage with it. So in the example of Perspective Roasters, that's going to turn into a magazine and a podcast and all this really cool, fun stuff that talks about different topics and coffee from the perspective of an artist and an analyst. And so they'll be able to use their podcast and the little sound bites that they get from that to sprinkle that across the internet and bring people back to their store so that people can buy their coffee and get a ticket into all the other fun stuff. And the potential for that is endless. So once you have a plan for how you're going to execute it, test the plan. Go and find some people that can pick your plan apart, people you trust, and people who don't have an agenda for whether your success is realized or not. Some people will surprise you and not, despite how much they love you, not want to see other people succeed. So go and find just a couple of people who can help you find the gaps in your plan, plug the gaps, test it, and then build it. So what we find a lot is that people have great ideas and they don't go about the business of executing. You need to get to the point of executing, and then the real hard work starts. One note before you do that. Make sure that you price your coffee correctly. And we're going to have in the next episode, we're going to talk about how to do that. But please, for the love of all things coffee, learn how to price your coffee. And an important part of this is elevating your barrier to entry into this venture by understanding the value chain and understanding all the expenses that are going to be involved in you running your business. Once you have figured all of that out and you know with confidence that you're going to sell your product at a price that puts profit in your pocket, then you've got to go out and hit the ground running. You've got to knock on doors, whether they're virtual doors, and expose your brand to people, or whether you've got to go out and actually find a way to get your coffee into the right people's hands. I mean, I don't know how you do that in the middle of a pandemic in the physical world, but perhaps that's the way you need to do it. But you've got to do it. What we find with a lot of people is that they have a beautiful brand. They have a wonderful plan. They launch their business and then they get surprised by why nobody's showing up. Well, this goes to the core of how you sell more coffee. In order to sell more coffee, you've got to go and expose your brand to the people who will buy it. And if that's not landing, find out from them why it's not landing. What's the obstacle that's in the way? Is the product too expensive? Are they getting enough value out of what you're offering? Do they like your product? Do they understand your product? Have you complicated it too much? That's where the fun is for the true business savvy person. How do I solve the problem that my customer's having with my product so that the barrier to entry for them is much lower? I hope this has been helpful. This is one of my favorite things to talk about with clients. This is a fun, inspiring subject where it's just so creative, and this industry is filled with beautiful creative minds. And so if you're somebody that wants to execute that, there is many opportunities to do that in 2020, regardless of what the pandemic is showing us. And if you're successful in being able to do this, you will go a long way to helping to sustain a troubled coffee value chain. The next episode, we're going to talk about how to price your coffee so that you are making money from it. Okay, friends. Peace, love, and peanut butter.